All right, I'm still in the nation's capital. I saw a news article that I want to talk about, and I was going to save this for a walk when I'm back home, but I'll do it here today because it's such a pleasant day out. I'm at the reflecting pool. The World War II memorial is what I'm walking up to. By the way, spectacular memorial. My grandfather was a Marine in the Pacific in World War II. He passed away 13 years ago, and I come here and I think about him, and it's, that whole generation has either passed or is close to passing. And, I think we call them the greatest generation. That may be being a little generous. I'm okay with being generous to them. They've deserved it. Hopefully someone will be generous to us someday. I want to talk about housing in Japan. What a weird topic to bring up in this space. In housing conversations, there is an argument about zoning, about kind of free markets, about economies, about height limits, about restrictions, about all these things. And there's a kind of meme or a refrain that I get from a certain group of market urbanisty types. They like to point to two places. They like to point to Houston, and they like to point to Japan or Tokyo as places like, look, they've got great affordable housing. We should just do what they do. And of course, then they cherry pick like the one thing that they like about this place, and they say, this is the cause of all the things. Housing is ridiculously complex. Like, there's so many things going on in the housing market that affects housing prices. Anybody who comes to you and cherry picks one and says, this is cause and effect for the outcome that I want or don't want, is either an idiot or is just like trying to pull one over on you. Housing is vastly more complicated than that. But there's an article that I came across today that talked about Japan in specific and how their housing market is in a deep decline. And it cited, and I think in a way very obvious, it cited their demographic situation. Japan is really, really old. Japan has a lot of old people and not a lot of young people. And the article actually suggested that within a couple decades, every other home in Japan is going to be empty, unoccupied. There's going to be nobody living in them. And not because people don't need homes, but because there's just not going to be that many people living in Japan. It's easy to see how you get supply and demand curve shifts in a place where you have declining and stagnating population, which is what they have in Japan. You see, it's kind of a shocking thing. I'm 50 years old. I grew up with this idea that the world was going to be overpopulated, that we were going to have way, way, way too many people, that the effect on the environment, the effect on humanity was just awful from overpopulation. Elon Musk a few years ago, by the way, P.T. Barnum, not a fan. This is not a pro Elon Musk thing, but I think he's right at times. Elon Musk said, our biggest problem is underpopulation. I remember hearing that going, geez, that just doesn't sit right with me because that's not how I was raised. That's not how I've been taught. Those are not the things that I have kind of been raised to be sensitive to. Yet if you look demographically, countries like China, countries like Japan, even to some degree, countries like the United States are subject to population stagnation, population contraction, the way we've seen in Russia, the way we've seen in Europe. When we're talking about housing, we can look at Japan and say, hey, huge success. We can cherry pick one point or two and say, here's why Japan has been so successful. There's a bigger, deeper story. And I'm not suggesting that population shifts is the only thing, but Japan's not known for its kind of robust immigration policy. Japan's not onboarding lots of outsiders. I've not had the privilege of going to Japan. I would really like to someday. I've not had the privilege of doing that yet, but I don't. The kind of buzz around Japan is, they don't have a Mexico next to them. They don't have a South America next to them. They don't have an ongoing debate about immigration the way we do in the US or the way other countries do that are kind of closer to migrant populations. Japan is going through a population decline. And to think that that wouldn't have an impact on housing prices, an impact that supersedes or is at least on par with regulatory impacts and financing impacts and the other impacts that people who point to places like Tokyo as being the model for what we should do, the idea that that isn't having a big impact is just silly. So cut it out. Housing is complex. Let's treat it that way.